everyone, thank you for joining us today for another webinar in our Market Access and International Approvals webinar series. My name is Crystal and I am part of the Testing and Certification Technical staff here at Vista Compliance Laboratories. So if you aren't aware of what we do at Vista Laboratories, we are an EMC RF Compliance Test Lab and Product Certification body, and we are experts in global regulatory approvals for radio frequency devices. So today we will be going over the requirements of radio frequency and telecommunications approval in European Union. In this webinar, we will provide an overview of the major topics necessary to get your radio devices on the right track for authorization and distribution in the European Union. Today we will be presenting to you the certification and approvals regulations as well as the technical requirements for electrical equipment, electronics, and wireless products and devices approval for the European Union. As an EMC RF Compliance Test Lab and notified body, we focus on wireless and RF device approvals. So today we will primarily be going over the specific requirements of the European Union. This will include the most populous countries of the European Union. If you have any questions on the topics presented today or any other immediate questions regarding compliance, testing, and product certification, you can reach us at info@vista-compliance.com. So let's begin with the presentation. What is CE? CE represents the Conformité Européenne, or CE mark. Is a declaration by the responsible party that the product labeled meets the requirements of the applicable EU directives. By fixing the CE marking, you are taking full responsibility for your product's compliance with the requirements of the relevant directives. Required in the following countries: Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Ireland, Italy, Latvia, Lithuania, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Malta, Norway, the Netherlands, Poland, Portugal, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, and Sweden. Other countries not in the EU that accepts the CE marking are Turkey, Iceland, Switzerland, Republic of Macedonia, Serbia, and Montenegro. The UK announced August 1st, 2023 that they would recognize the CE marking with the exception of medical devices and in vitro diagnosis IVD devices. You are responsible for maintaining the technical documentation, carrying out the testing, and issuing the Declaration of Conformity, DOC, as well as the correct labeling of the product, etc. The CE marking is an indication, but not proof, of the product's compliance with European EU health, safety, and environmental protection directives and regulations. CE marking on a product indicates the government officials that the product may be legally placed on the market within their country. CE marking on the product ensures the free movement of the product within the EFTA and European Union EU single market totaling 30 countries, and the EC Declaration of Conformity is the written statement and the single declaration drawn up by the manufacturer to demonstrate the fulfillment of the EU requirements relating to the product bearing the CE marking that has been manufactured. CE marking on a product permits the withdrawal of the non-conforming products by customs and enforcement vigilance authorities. Here's an overview of the webinar's agenda covering the EU new legislative framework. There are three major departments within the electrical and electronic engineering industries EEI. The first is Electromagnetic Compatibility Directive, EMCD. The second is Radio Equipment Directive, known as the RED. And third is Low Voltage Directive, LVD. To improve the internal market for goods and strengthen the condition for placing a wide range of products on the EU market, the new legislative framework was adopted in 2008. It is a package of measures that aim to improve market surveillance and boost the quality of conformity assessments. It also clarifies the use of CE marking and creates a toolbox of measures for use in product legislation. There are over 20 CE directives, but when we talk about the CE being used for EU market access for electrical products, we are talking about the compliance with the essential requirements of these directives. Electrical and Electronic Engineering Industries, EEI, EU policies affecting electrical and electronic engineering industries, EEI, covers three major areas. EMCD, covering all equipment that can generate or be affected by electromagnetic disturbances. Red, it applies to all products using the radio frequency spectrum. LED, covering health and safety risk caused by electrical equipment of specific voltage ranges. As a manufacturer, there are other directives you and your suppliers will need to be aware of, such as ROHS Directive, WEEE Directive, Battery Directive, but today we cover these three directives in the Electrical and Electronic Engineering Industries, EEI, including electrical devices, radio equipment, and telecommunications industries. Examples are mobile phones, the mobile network infrastructure, TV sets, power supply units, wireless routers, maritime radios, sensors, and much, much more. Here is a quick visual overview of what we will be discussing for EMCD, mandatory products and exclusions, conformity assessments, technical documentation, CE marking, and surveillance. Here's a quick overview of the EMCD timeline. The old EMCD Directive 2004/108/EC in force to create a safe electromagnetic environment in the Union. The new EMCD Directive 2014/30/EU enters into force on April 18, 2014. The new EMCD Directive 2014/30/EU applies to products placed on the market on or after April 20th, 2016, not before. Presently, the new EMCD Directive 2014/30/EU still applies. All electrical devices influence each other when interconnected or close to each other. For example, interfaces between TV sets, GSM handsets, radios, and nearby washing machines or electrical power lines. The purpose of the electromagnetic compatibility EMC is to keep all of those side effects under reasonable control. EMC designates all the existing and future techniques and technologies for reducing disturbances and enhancing immunity. The electromagnetic compatibility EMC Directive 2014/30/EU ensures that electrical and electronic equipment does not generate or is not affected by electromagnetic disturbances. EMCD entered into force on April 18, 2014 and will be applicable as of April 20th, 2016. New EMCD will replace the existing EMCD Directive 2004/108/EC as of April 20th, 2016. Directive 2004/108/EC is the old EMCD directive. EMCD applies to products that are covered by the RNTTE directive, but not covered now by the RED telecommunications terminal equipment. EMCD no longer applies to products covered by the RED. Regulated products. Under EMCD, equipment is categorized as apparatus or fixed installation. Apparatus, any finished appliance made available, i.e. making available on the market as a single functional unit intended for the end user and liable to generate electromagnetic disturbances, or the performance of which is liable to be affected by such a disturbance. Fixed installation, a particular combination of several types of apparatuses and, where applicable, other devices which are assembled, installed, and intended to be used permanently at a predefined location. An example of apparatuses will include computer disk drives, USB memory sticks, household appliances, fixed air conditioning installations, lighting installations, and power supply networks. Here's a list of exempt products. The following categories of products are exempt or not regulated by the EMCD. Equipment without electrical or electronic parts. Explicitly excludes equipment, radio equipment, aeronautical products, radio equipment intended for use by radio amateurs. Equipment covered by other specific union legislations. Motor vehicle equipment, medical devices, marine equipment, agricultural equipment, inherently benign equipment, custom-built evaluation kits. Inherently benign. First, it is incapable of generating or contributing to electromagnetic emissions which exceed a level allowing radio and telecommunication equipment and other equipment to operate as intended. And 2, it will operate without unacceptable degradation in the presence of the electromagnetic disturbances normally present in its intended environment. Custom kits used by professionals for the purpose of research and development, such as cables, batteries, corded headphones. EMCD Conformity Assessment. Essential Requirements. General. EMC Emissions plus immunity for all apparatuses. Specific for fixed installations. Harmonized standards. Product-specific. Product family. Generic. Type examination. Reviewed by notified body. EU Type Examination Certificate. Declaration of Conformity. Official declaration of compliance within the legislation. The general idea is the manufacturer shall perform an EMC assessment of the apparatus based on the relevant phenomena in order to ensure that he meets the essential requirements. As noted above, the EMCD does not require the mandatory intervention from a third party, e.g. notified body or laboratory, when carrying out the assessment. The EMCD sets out mandatory essential requirements formulated in the general manner for all equipment, e.g. apparatus and fixed installations, within its scope. These essential requirements define the results to be obtained, but do not specify the detailed technical requirements. It also allows adapting the equipment and product design as a result of technological progress. The appropriate technical solutions to meet the 26 requirements are not imposed as long as the equipment complies with the essential requirements. Compliance with the applicable standards gives presumption of conformity in the essential requirements of the EMCD, meaning complying with the applicable harmonized standard means conformity with the essential requirements. Applying several standards may be necessary to address all relevant phenomena in all relevant frequency ranges. For multiple function apparatuses, it may be necessary to select standards relevant to all primary functions. When the manufacturer chooses to apply harmonized standards, he shall select them by order of importance. Product-specific standards, if available. Product family standards, if available. Generic standards. An EMC assessment where no harmonized standards have been applied, usually done when there are no harmonized standards or where they do not cover all the essential requirements applicable to the apparatus. Technical documents shall be prepared by the manufacturers to determine and demonstrate evidence of compliance with the essential requirements. The compliance of apparatus with all the relevant essential requirements is declared by the EU Declaration of Conformity (DOC), issued by the manufacturer based inside or outside the EU or his authorized representative in the EU. As the DOC is an official declaration of compliance with a legislation, it must be signed by the manufacturer or the authorized representative. EMCD Conformity Assessment. EMC Assessment. Product Specification Required. Harmonized Standards Applied. EN 55032:2012. Electromagnetic Compatibility of Multimedia Equipment Emissions Requirements. Radiated and Conducted Emissions. EN 55024:2010. Information Technology Equipment, Media Characteristics, Limit and Methods of Measurements, Radiated and Conducted Immunity, Burst and Surge, EFT, ESD, Testing, Lead Time 1 to 2 weeks, requires one testing sample, test reports, part of technical documentation. And here is a quick look at the highlighted part of the EMC assessment of apparatus. Harmonized standards applied, yes. apparatus check compliance with Harmonized Standards HS test reports. EMCD conformity assessment continued. Technical documentation, product identification and specification, general description of the apparatus, schematics, block diagrams, designs, descriptions/explanations as necessary for the understanding of these documents and the operation of the apparatus. Evidence of compliance with harmonized standards if they have been applied. EU type examination certificate issued by the notified body. EU Declaration of Conformity DOC. EU type examination certificate. Modifications to the approved type that may affect the conformity of the apparatus with the essential requirements of this directive should be communicated to the NB, also known as the notified body. The notified body must review the technical designs as it pertains to the relevant essential requirements of the EMC directive and issue an EU type examination certificate to the applicant indicating the aspect of the essential requirements that have been assessed. And on the side, we start from the test reports to the technical documentation. EU type examination by the notified body? Yes. Annex 3 followed. EU examination certificate. EMCD conformity assessment continued. Declaration of conformity apparatus model/product will include product type, batch, or serial number, name and address of the manufacturer or his authorized representative, statement that the EU Declaration of Conformity is issued under the sole responsibility of the manufacturer, object of the declaration, statement that the object of the declaration is in conformity with the relevant union harmonized legislation, notified body name, number, certificate number, labeling, CE marking on product or packaging if not feasible to be on product, identification number by batch, type, and serial corresponding to DOC, additional information. The compliance of apparatus with all relevant essential requirements is declared by the EU Declaration of Conformity DOC issued by the manufacturer based inside or outside the EU or his authorized representative in the EU, as the DOC is an official declaration of compliance with the legislation. It will be signed by the manufacturer or his authorized representative. By drawing up the EU Declaration of Conformity, the manufacturer shall assume a responsibility for the compliance of the apparatus with the requirements laid down in this directive. Contents. Object of the declaration, identification of apparatus following traceability. It may include a color image of sufficient clarity where necessary for the identification of the apparatus. The CE marking is a key indicator, but not proof of the product's compliance with European Union EU health, safety, and environmental protection directives and regulations. There are no specific color requirements for the color or background of the CE marking. In other words, it is not required to print the letter CE in black against a white background. However, the color scheme for the foreground and background should be sufficiently complementary so that the CE logo is clearly visible. Vertical dimensions no less than 5 millimeters. Product must be accompanied by additional info such as contact info, use installation disclaimers, etc. And from EU type examination certificate is the Declaration of Conformity, and then finally the CE marking. EMCD surveillance. Member states are required to take all appropriate measures to ensure that equipment is placed on the market only if it complies with the requirements of the EMCD. It must maintain the technical requirements for 10 years. Penalties determined by member states. Penalties for noncompliance are proportionate to the infringement and may be increased if the relevant economic operator has previously committed similar infringements. Sanctions are imposed by means of fines whose sums vary from one member state to another. They may also include criminal sanctions for serious infringements. Non-compliant products are subject to corrective measures, bans, withdrawals, or recalls. Member states shall lay down rules on penalties applicable to infringements by economic operators of the provisions of national law adopted and shall take all measures necessary to ensure that they are enforced. We have now finished going over electromagnetic compatibility Compatibility Directive EMCD, and we will be moving on to Radio Equipment Directive, known as the RED. Here's a quick overview of what we'll be going over when we talk about the RED. The overview, the mandatory products and exclusions, conformity assessment, technical documents, CE marking, and surveillance. Now here's a quick look at the timeline for the creation of the RED as we know it today. The old RNTTE Directive 1999/5/EC was in force as Radio and Telecom Equipment Framework. The new RED Directive 2014/53/EU enters into force on June 11, 2014. The new RED Directive 2014/53/EU applies to products placed on the market on and after June 13, 2016 and not before. 1-year transition period was allowed until June 12, 2017. Presently, the new RED Directive 2014/53/EU still applies. RED development started in 2007. The Radio Equipment Directive 2014/53/EU RED establishes a regulatory framework for placing radio equipment on the market. It ensures a single market for radio equipment by setting essential requirements for health and safety, electromagnetic compatibility, and the efficient use of the radio spectrum. It also provides the basis for further regulating, governing some additional aspects. These include technical features for the protection of privacy, personal data, and against fraud. Furthermore, additional aspects cover interoperability, access to emergency services, and compliance regarding the combination of radio equipment and software. The RED was established in the OJEU on May 22, 2014, entering into force on June 11, 2014, and is applicable as of June 13, 2016. It includes a 1-year transition period, which ended on June 12, 2017, Article 48. During the transition phase, manufacturers were allowed to place on the market radio equipment compliant with either the RED or the EU legislation applicable before June 13, 2016. Pure radio sound and radio TV receives only equipment which has been excluded from the RNTTE directive falls within the scope of the RED. Equipment operating below 9 kHz falls within the scope of the RED. Radio determination equipment is now clearly included within the scope of the RED. Pure wired telecom terminal equipment now falls outside the scope of the RED. RED regulated products, radio equipment. An electrical and electronic product which intentionally emits radio waves for the purpose of radio communications receives radio waves for the purpose of radio communication. An electrical or electronic product which must be completed with an accessory such as an antenna so as to intentionally emit radio waves for the purpose of radio communication receive radio waves for the purpose of radio communication. RF modules, radio frequency modules, as well as components that have an embed RF module also fits this definition. RED exempt products. The following categories of products are exempt, not regulated by the RED. Radio equipment exclusively used for activities concerning public security, defense, and state security. Radio equipment used by radio amateurs. Marine equipment, airborne equipment, custom-built evaluation kits for the purpose of evaluation, research, and development. Specific and explicitly stated cases: antennas, infrared devices, cabling, and wiring. Radio amateurs and products not placed on the market. RED conformity assessment. Essential requirements applicable to all radio equipment. Health and Safety Directive 2014/35/EU. EMC Directive 2014/30/EU. Radio Directive 2014/53/EU. Applicable to certain types of radio equipment. Harmonized Standards HS. Product Specific Harmonized Standard. General Harmonized Standard. Annex to Module A, Declaration of Conformity, DOC. Annex 3, Module B plus C, Type Examination plus DOC. Annex 4, Module H, Full Quality Assurance. Essential requirements applicable to all radio equipment. The protection of health and safety of persons and of domestic animals, and the protection of property, including the objectives with respect to safety requirements set out in the Directive 2014/35/EU-LVD. Adequate levels of electromagnetic compatibility as set out in Directive 2014/30/EU, that it both effectively uses and supports the efficient use of radio spectrum in order to avoid harmful interference. Second, essential requirements applicable only to certain types of radio equipment pursuant to specific legal acts adopted by the Commission, delegated acts. Currently only applicable to radio equipment supporting access to emergency services, Article 3.3g. A manufacturer which has the intention to apply harmonized standards for the conformity assessments of its products has to apply in priority the product-specific harmonized standards, and only if this one is not available, the generic one, in order to benefit of presumption of conformity with the essential requirements of the RED. Annex 2. Manufacturer is required to issue a DOC when the compliance of the radio equipment with the applicable requirements of the RED has been demonstrated, and declares it is the sole responsibility through internal production control and the radio equipment concerned satisfies the essential requirements. Annex 3. Conformity to type described in the EU Type Examination Certificate from NB Review, and declares responsibility through internal production control. Annex 4. NB has to perform assessments to verify compliance of the quality management systems with the requirements. RED Conformity Assessment continued. Health and safety, harmonized standards apply. EN 62479:2010. Low-powered electronic and electrical equipment with the base restrictions related to human exposure to electromagnetic fields, 10 MHz to 300 GHz. EN 62368-1:2014. Audio and video, information and communication technology equipment safety requirements. Testing. Lead time 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the complexity of your device. 1 test sample required. And on the side is the essential requirements, Article 3, Health and Safety, Article 3.1a. RED Conformity Assessment continued. Electromagnetic compatibility, harmonized standards apply. ITSE EN 301-489-1 version 2.1.1. ITSE EN 301-489-17 version 3.1.1. Testing. Lead time 1 week, depending on complexity of the device. 1 test sample required. Essential requirements, EMC Article 3.1b. Electromagnetic compatibility EMC standards for radio equipment and services. Part 1. Common technical requirements, harmonized standards covering the essential requirements of Article 3.1b of Directive 2014/53/EU and the essential requirements of Article 6 of Directive 2014/30/EU. Electromagnetic compatibility EMC standards for radio equipment and services. Part 17. Specific conditions for broadband data transmission systems. Harmonized standards covering the essential requirements of Article 3.1b of Directive 2014/53/EU. Different than the EMC-D standards, these are the radio EMC standards. Radio Conformity Assessment continued. Radio, harmonized standards applied. ITSE EN 300-328 version 2.1.1. Wideband transmission systems, data transmission equipment operating in the 2.4 GHz ISM band and using wideband modulation techniques. Harmonized standards covering the essential requirements of Article 3.2 of Directive 2014/53/EU. Testing. Lead time 1 to 2 weeks. Varies depending on the complexity of your device. 4G cellular devices and base stations can take up to 4 to 6 weeks. 1 test sample required. The essential requirements, Article 3, Radio, Article 3.2. RED Conformity Assessment, Technical Documentation, Product General Description, Internal and External Photos, where the EUT is next to a ruler going its length and width of the device. Software and firmware affecting compliance, user information, installation instruction, EU type examination certificate issued by the notified body, EU Declaration of Conformity DOC, Declaration of Radio Equipment has been constructed so that it can operate in at least one member state, labeling, CE marking on product or packaging if not feasible to be on the product, identification number by batch, type, and serial corresponding to DOC. Technical documentation for the conformity assessment procedures. A copy of the DOC or a simplified declaration of conformity has to accompany each radio equipment. Manufacturer shall ensure the radio equipment shall be so constructed that it can be operated in at least one member state or Switzerland without infringing applicable requirements on the use of the radio spectrum. Minimum height for the CE label is 5 millimeters. Additional info is needed, such as the instructions and safety information in the language of the member state. Annex 2. Manufacturer is required to issue a DOC when the compliance of the radio equipment with the applicable requirements of the RED have been demonstrated, and declares that it is their sole responsibility through internal production control that the radio equipment concerned satisfies the essential requirements. Annex 3. Conformity to type described in the EU type examination certificate from NB review and declares responsibility through the internal production control. Now for the left side, essential requirements, Article 3, Health and Safety, Article 3.1a, AMC, Article 3.1, and if you go down, that goes to Annex 2, Module A, or Annex 3, Module B and C, with a notified body, or Annex 4, Module H, with NB. Road surveillance. Member states are required to take all appropriate measures to ensure the equipment is placed on the market only if it complies with the requirements of the RED. You must maintain the technical documentation for 10 years. Penalties determined by member states. Penalties for non-compliance are proportionate to the infringement and may be increased if the relevant economic operators have previously committed similar infringements. Sanctions are imposed by means of fines, whose sums vary from one member state to another. They may also include criminal sanctions for serious infringements. Non-compliance products are subject to corrective measures, bans, withdrawals, or recalls. Member states shall lay down rules on penalties applicable to infringements by economic operators of the provisions of national law adopted and shall take all measures necessary to ensure that they are enforced. We have now completed the Radio Equipment Directive RED. Now let's move on to Low Voltage Directive LVD. The Low Voltage Directive LVD 2014/35/EU ensures electrical equipment within certain voltage limits provides a high level of protection for European citizens and benefits fully from the single market. It has been applicable since April 20th, 2016. The LVD covers health and safety risk on electrical equipment operating with an input or output voltage of between 50 to 1000 volts for alternating circuits, 75 to 1500 volts for direct current. It applies to a wide range of electrical equipment for both consumer and professional usage, such as household appliances, cables, power supply units, laser equipment, certain components, for example, fuses. Here's a quick overview for LVD. The overview, the mandatory products and exclusions, conformity assessment, technical documentation, CE, and surveillance. Let's take a look at the timeline for the creation of the LVD as we know it today. The old LVD Directive 2006/95/EC was enforced for electrical safety. The new LVD Directive 2014/35/EU entered into force on April 18, 2014. The new LVD Directive 2014/35/EU applied to products placed on the market on or after April 20th, 2016, and not before. Presently, the new LVD Directive 2014/35/EU still applies. LVD regulated products. Electrical equipment. The LVD applies to all electrical equipment designed for use with a voltage rating 50 to 1000 volts for alternating currents, VAC, 75 to 1500 volts for direct current, VDC. Voltage ratings refer to the voltage of the electrical input or output, not the voltages that may appear inside the equipment. LVD includes both electrical equipment intended for incorporation into other equipment and equipment intended to be used directly without being incorporated. Meaning components are also regulated under LVD. LVD covers consumer goods such as electrical appliances, lighting equipment, electric motors and alternators, electrical wiring, appliance couplers and cord sets, electrical installation equipment, cable management systems, etc. LVD exempt products. The following categories of products are exempt, not regulated by the LVD. Electrical equipment for use in an explosive atmosphere, electrical equipment for radiology and medical purposes, electrical parts for goods and passenger lifts, electricity meters, plugs and sockets outlets for domestic use, electric fence controllers, radio electrical interference, specialized electrical equipment for use on ships, airways, and aircrafts, which complies with the safety provision drawn up by international bodies in which the member states participate, custom-built evaluation kits destined for professionals to be used solely at research or development facilities for such purposes. Some are very specialized and have local member state laws. LVD Conformity Assessment. Internal production control. The product and quality system assessment procedures is carried out by the manufacturer through its own internal production control. Obligations of the manufacturer, technical documentation, declaration of conformity, CE marking. There is no conformity assessment procedure in the LVD which requires the intervention of a notified body. LVD Conformity Assessment continued. Low Voltage Directive. Harmonized standards applied. EN 62368-1:2014 and EN 62368-1:2014/AC:2015 Audio and Video Information and Communication Technology Equipment, replacing EN 6950-1:2006 and EN 60065:2014. Testing. Lead time 1 to 2 weeks. 1 test sample required. The new approach in IEC 62368 focuses on demonstrating considerations on known hazards and that the product is designed to be safely operated in that context, as opposed to IEC 60950 and IEC 60065, where the emphasis is on whether the prescribed specifications have been met, though hazard base 62368-1 does not require risk analysts like IEC 60601-1. LVD Conformity Assessment continued. Technical documentation, general description of the electrical equipment, conceptual designs and manufacturing, drawings and schemes of components, sub-assemblies, circuits, etc. Descriptions and explanation necessary for the understanding of those drawings and schemes, the operation of the equipment, results of design, calculations made, examinations carried out, list of harmonized standards applied, test reports, declaration of conformity, labeling. The manufacturer shall affix the CE marking to each individual electrical equipment that satisfies the applicable requirements of the LVD. Other things that are included are schematics and bills of materials. The manufacturer shall draw up a written EU declaration of conformity for a product model and keep it together with the technical documentation at the disposal of the national market surveillance authorities for 10 years after electrical equipment has been placed on the market. The EU declaration of conformity shall identify the electrical equipment for which it has been drawn up. A copy of the EU declaration of conformity shall be made available to the relevant market surveillance authorities upon request. LVD surveillance. If there is sufficient reason to believe that the electrical equipment presents a risk to the health and safety of persons or domestic animals or to property, authorities shall carry out an evaluation covering the LVD requirements. The LVD requires that the manufacturer and others in the supply chain presents documents to the market surveillance authorities in the local language of the member state concerned. Must maintain the technical documents for 10 years. Penalties. If found to be non-compliant, appropriate corrective actions commensurate with the nature of the risk may be prescribed. Bring the electrical equipment into compliance, withdraw it from the market, recall it within a reasonable period, commensurate with the nature of the risk as they may prescribe. Member states shall lay down rules on penalties applicable to infringements by economic operators of the provisions of national law adopted and shall take all measures necessary to ensure that they are enforced. The LVD requires that the manufacturer and others in the supply chain present documents in the language easily understood by market surveillance authorities of the member state concerned, which means the local language. We have now finished the last slide for the low voltage directive LVD, and that concludes our webinar.